David here with Figboot on Pens, back again with another review. Today I have for you a limited edition ink from Papier Plume, which will be released at the Chicago Pen Show this upcoming weekend. Papier Plume has released a number of interestingly themed inks over the years, and they've released a number in conjunction with pen shows. So what I'm going to do today is talk a bit about the theme of this ink, and then I'll get right to showing you what it looks like. The name of this ink is the Faceless Lady, which refers to a statue perched on the top of a Chicago skyscraper. The figure was sculpted by an artist by the name of John Storrs for the top of the Board of Trade building in Chicago, depicting the Roman goddess Ceres. She was the goddess of agriculture and grain crops, which seemed appropriate for a building where those items were traded. The statue is made out of cast aluminum with a steel frame and weighs 6,500 pounds. Though the model he used for the statue, by all accounts, had a very pretty face, he chose to make the statue faceless. Storrs reportedly thought that the building was so tall that no one would ever be able to see the statue's face. The Board of Trade building was completed in 1930. It was Chicago's tallest building and held that honor until 1965. Nowadays, the nearby Willis Tower dwarfs the building, and a good view of the statue can be had from around the 66th floor. Okay, in order to see this ink in action, as well as hear a recommendation I have for a TV show, please join me over here at camera 2. Okay, here we have the Papier Plume Faceless Lady. And as you can see, I have been using this ink. It is the Faceless Lady, not the Aceless Lady. I had a little incident here where I had some drips. Now, I don't mind it when I do that to ink bottles down the line after I've been using it for a while. It adds a little character to it, but I was a little disappointed that I did that right off the bat, so I couldn't show this very nice label. Papier Plume's done a good job of kind of incorporating a nice, unique label in with their limited edition inks. And then also they have this traditional wax seal here at the top. They make some really solid inks. So this is what the ink looks like. It's a nice kind of coppery greenish gray with a little bit of shimmer to it. It kind of looks like the metal that's on the statue. So in regard to some other comparisons, this is what it looks like with Sailor Yamadori, which is a little more on the blue side. And then here it is with Papier Plume's Iron Lace, which is a little bit more on the black side. Here it is with one of my favorite inks, which is the Tassia Saba Midori. It's fairly close to that. Saba Midori is a little bit more green. And then here's another Chicago-themed ink that Papier Plume came out with, which was Cloudgate, which is a little bit more on the gray side. This is what the ink looks like on some 52-gram Tomoe River paper. Over here is with a Q-tip. And then over here is with a swab, and then this is some eyedropper, and you can see that there's a lot of that shimmer comes out, especially when you have the higher saturations. But as you can see here, even though I apply a heavy dosage over here, and it was minimal on the bleed through. You can see it bleeds through a lot, but this is a very heavy application, so that's to be expected. But it's a ink that has some decent shading to it, as well as that shimmer that you can see. And then here we have the ink. This is using Rhodia 80-gram paper. I find that the ghosting is very low and the bleed is low. Here on the Tomoe River paper, or not, sorry, the Rhodia paper, you can see that there's virtually no ghosting or bleed through. I'd say that the shade is medium to high. This is a rather wet ink. And the sheen is low, but I'd say that the shimmer is medium on here. It's really not like a heavy shimmer ink. In regard to pens, I have a couple of them here. So to begin with, we have an extra fine, which is something I recently reviewed, which is the Diplomat Nexus. So we have the Diplomat Nexus. And this one was the extra fine. Next up, we have a pen that was actually produced by Papier Plume in conjunction with the Herbert Pen Company, which was the Wetland Cypress. And the distinguishing feature about this is not only the reclaimed cypress wood they use, but this is an amazing clip that is basically an artist in New Orleans that makes jewelry and things like this that are representing maps and like this is a river in the New Orleans area. And so I just think that's incredibly unique and very cool. And so that's one of my favorite clips. If I ever did a video on favorite clips, this might happen to be or might have to be on that list. But this is we'll call it the Papier Plume. Wetland Cypress. And this is a medium. And finally, we have a pen that I recently reviewed that I really enjoy the nib of. This is a pen from Tom's Studio. It's just called the Tom Studio Fountain Pen. And this one, so we're just going to say Tom Studio. And this is an architect grind. Well, you get the idea. So these are the pens we're going to take a look at. In regard to a writing sample, while I typically try to tie in some quotes to something relating to the ink, I was going to do something a bit different this time. When millennials are asked about their favorite TV show of all time, there is one that consistently ranks at the top of most people's lists. It's a show that debuted almost 20 years ago and has only risen in popularity over that time. I am talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you're not familiar with the show, it's a cartoon which aired on Nickelodeon for 3 incredible seasons, but I feel like simply calling this show a Nickelodeon cartoon does it some disservice. Yes, it does have some cartoonish and silly moments, but this is a show that has incredible storytelling and depth and 3-dimensional characters who grow and change over time and who aren't perfect, and serious themes that you normally wouldn't see something initially aimed at younger audiences. If you have kids, it's a great show that you can sit down and watch with them. I feel that you can enjoy it on many different levels. So much of children's entertainment can be like torture for parents to sit through, but this show is significantly different. Now, there was a full-length movie. Ignore it. It's widely considered to be one of the worst movies of all time. Netflix has recently released the first season of a live-action version of the story. I've heard good things about it, mainly that it's decent enough, but I wouldn't start with watching that show. Start with watching the cartoon first. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I'm in my 50s and I loved it. I wish I wouldn't have waited almost 20 years to watch it. Okay, so in regard to the writing sample, I wanted to share 3 memorable quotes from the series, beginning with one from May. It basically says, "You miscalculated. I love Zuko more than I fear you." May had a very dry personality and was very one-dimensional. And near the end of the series, it was nice to see a more personable side of her and a much more faceted personality. Next up, we have one of the funniest lines from the series, which starts from Sokka, which... S-O-K. I guess I could have wrote May's name down as well. Or I'm sorry, Sokka, excuse me. where Sokka says, "My first girlfriend turned into the moon," and Zuko replies, "That's rough, buddy." Now, explaining the backstory of this would take too long, but what I find funny about it is what Zuko said boils down to one word, which is buddy. While the interaction is humorous, Zuko really isn't a person that would use the word buddy. That's really against his personality, which kind of adds to the humor. And then finally, we have a quote from the always wise Uncle Iroh. And his words of advice were, if you look for the light, you will often find it. If you look for the dark, that is all you will ever see. Okay, that's enough Avatar talk, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a show that I would highly recommend no matter what your age. It is truly special. In regard to the rest of this review, I'd say the flow is wet on here. You can see here that it took between 15 and 30 seconds for the architect grind. It actually went a little bit longer than 30 seconds to dry. And let's go ahead and put some water on here to do a waterproof test. And while this sits, let's take a look at some chromatography. I always enjoy taking a look at this chromatography just because I think it's really cool how the colors separate out. And there was some surprising colors that I found that were in this particular ink. This is what the ink looks like. First of all, you can see how the shimmer just kind of sits there and doesn't move, but we can start with grays and some blues and purples, which would then went into some yellows and greens and even some darker blues, which were interesting. Okay, this ink doesn't claim to be waterproof, and it held up okay. It's not going to be disastrous if it gets wet, but it didn't dissolve immediately, which is good. So I said that Papier Plume, the Faceless Lady, will be available at the Chicago Pen Show and possibly afterward on their website. The ink generally sells, don't quote me on this, but it's generally around $10. I believe that's been their standard price. What they'll do is they'll have it there at the show, and if they don't sell out, then they will make it available on their website. It might be 14, I don't know, 10 or 14, right around that area. It's a very reasonably priced ink, and Papier Plume always does a good job with their limited editions like this. So there is a look at the Papier Plume, the Faceless Lady. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.